We have our final session of the day. This is our closing keynote and one carrying on the topic of supply chain. I'm fascinated and I'm so delighted to welcome our keynote speaker, Carrie Wibben, who's the Senior Vice President in Exiger Government Solutions based in Tyson's Corner, so very close to where we are now. Carrie has a distinguished career in national security and intelligence spanning more than 2 decades of service across various government agencies, including the U.S. Department of Defense, the Executive Office of the President, and the Office of Director of National Intelligence. Carrie was the former Deputy Director of the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency before she left government to provide critical supply chain management in the wake of COVID-19. Carrie, what haven't you done? This is amazing. We're so grateful to have you join us today. Thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much for that very kind introduction. I think I was going to introduce myself, but I don't need to. That was wonderful and very kind. So I think I'll just jump right in. When I give talks like this, I really like to start with the why. And for me, that means the threat landscape. So the last 5 years of my career really were very heavily focused on leading the Department of Defense's counterintelligence enterprise. And before that, I had spent a number of years at the national level within the Director of National Intelligence and what was then known as the National Counterintelligence Executive and is now the National Counterintelligence and Security Center. And then my last year was really focused on standing up and leading as the Deputy Director of the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, which is a 14,000 person agency with a government-wide mission. So the way I view the world, the lens I kind of view the world through, it's really not ideal sometimes because I see a lot of bad guys behind every corner. But it really does, I think, set the stage in terms of what we are all, what unites us kind of as a group of folks here. Because we really all have dedicated, I think, a good portion of our careers and our passion to defending our nation and really, kind of coming together as Team USA, right, to make sure that we are, countering our adversaries in every way possible, using all of the various authorities and technologies and skill sets that we can bring to bear as a nation. So when it comes to the why, the importance of cybersecurity and more broadly enhancing, protection of the defense industrial base and affiliated supply chains. For me, I truly believe that a slow awakening has occurred over the past several years. And I think the fact, what's really become a well-recognized and accepted concept is that our adversaries no longer have to kinetically engage us to threaten our way of life. From a counterintelligence standpoint, I can tell you that our adversaries every single day, and I think most of you know this, engage us non-kinetically through blended operations that range from attacks to our supply chain in the cyber domain, where they really target what I call the weak underbelly of the defense industrial base to steal our IP and work their way up that trust framework to exploitation of human elements. And our adversaries, the more sophisticated adversaries, really exploit multiple threat vectors simultaneously. And there are actually countless counterintelligence investigations that have now gone to prosecution that are publicly available that show how our adversaries, China in particular, has employed multiple different means and threat vectors in pursuit of a single high value target. So every single day, and actually I would say every minute of every day, China and Russia are employing a very broad and powerful range of intelligence and military capabilities to steal our IP. And the why behind that, in terms of their objectives, is very clear. They want to gain a competitive economic and military advantage over us as a nation to really achieve dominance and overmatch and threaten our way of life and our Western ideals. So you heard Ellen Lord speak earlier this afternoon about the shift in the national defense strategy over really our tenure. I work very closely with Ellen Lord at the Office of Secretary of Defense to focus much more heavily on what I call hard targets: China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and the gray zone. Right? You heard her talk about the gray zone. And I can tell you, having been at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence when we were standing that up, post 9/11, post IRTPA, I was at the White House, and then, you know, the Office of Secretary of Defense, really from 2010 to 2019 during that time frame. I can tell you that DoD and the intel community recognized long before that shift actually meaningfully occurred that our response as a nation has been woefully inadequate, both within the government and across the private sector, to address the hard targets threat. So a couple stats I like to point to that really hit home, I think, for me, and emphasize the problem. It's estimated, and I'll get you the citation on this, estimated that 1 in every 6 North American companies has fallen victim to IP theft. And the estimated value of that theft is up to, I think, over $600 billion. So, you know, you let that sink in and you think about that, you know, that absolutely, you know, has a net effect and absolutely starts to take a toll at that level from a cost standpoint. And just, again, 1 in 6 companies falling victim to IP theft. I think that stat's a little bit old. I would imagine it's actually higher now. And you know, again, the net effect, what does that mean? What it really means is that our competitive advantage as a nation, our ability to fight and win the wars of the future, our ability to maintain enough military and technological dominance to deter those wars in the future is absolutely slipping from our grasp. And, you know, to provide another fun fact, and some of you might have heard this, it's a little bit dated, maybe about a year ago, but FBI Director Chris Wray mentioned that China has significantly ramped up illegal activity to subvert our supply chains to the point where the FBI is opening up a new China-related counterintelligence investigation every 10 hours, and over half of the FBI's active counterintelligence caseload is related to China. So, you know, this is as real as it gets. We are in a fight. This is the gray zone. And again, I think that there's a silver lining, right? The silver lining is that the awakening, I truly believe, has finally occurred. Congress gets it. I've been in this town a long time. Congress gets it, the White House and the executive branch get it, and private industry gets it. And so, you know, and I think now more than anything, thanks to the pandemic, even middle America gets it, because, you know, the shortage in critical medical supplies across our nation suddenly made this concept of supply chain fragility and vulnerability, and frankly, the massive problem we have as a nation on foreign reliance and over-reliance on foreign source supply. It's a household concept now. Everybody feels it, and this is just the beginning. I'm sure you've seen a lot of the articles this week that really, you know, highlight and feature that it's only going to get worse, and I don't know when it gets better. But I think the good news is, you know, our eyes are open to it now. And my hope is that now, I spent most of my time in the Pentagon and at the ODNI just focused on awareness, getting people to open their eyes and recognize that we are in a fight, and it's the fight of our lives, the fight of our generation. And I think that we are there now. I truly think we have at least turned the corner on the awareness side. And my hope is that we can start to make some very meaningful progress. When I think about, you know, this town and crises and how short everyone's memory is, you know, I sort of think about supply chain risk management, and I think, okay, is this a fad? Is it going to, you know, kind of go away as fast as it came into the spotlight? And I think, from my perspective, I don't think so. I think it's here to stay. I think it's certainly front and center right now, but I think it is so foundational to, again, our economic security and our national security that it's going to remain very high on the national security agenda. And, you know, everyone sees the trend. And I think the fact is we're seeing the number of China and supply chain related legislative provisions, executive orders, regulations, policies, task forces, it's really exploded over the last 18 months. And I think that what gives me the most hope truly is that this topic really seems to be one of the few bipartisan issues in this town, in DC. And so that makes me think maybe we can make some progress, because, you know, it really does transcend the political aisle in a way that few things do these days. I think everyone knows DoD is the big dog at the fire hydrant, right? Everyone knows DoD. I think it's roughly half the federal government. And so where DoD goes and leads the way with major government reforms, the rest of the government tends to follow. And I think with supply chain risk management, it's really no different. I think that will be kind of, DoD will lead the way. I think the rest of the government will follow, the rest of civilian agencies. And hopefully what we're starting to see now is the defense industrial base will also follow. As you may or may not know, the DIB, the Defense Industrial Base, is just one of 16 designated critical infrastructure sectors. So if we zoom out a little bit from, the DIB, really just one of 16 critical infrastructure sectors, and the topic of critical infrastructure, again, wearing my counterintelligence hat, the trend line of cyber and ransomware attacks is absolutely undeniable. And I can tell you that it is strategic and intentional. We have seen our adversaries, namely Russia, attack our government agencies with SolarWinds, our fuel supply with the Colonial Pipeline hack, our water supply with the Oldsmar water plant hack in Florida, our healthcare and medical infrastructure, numerous hospital attacks, and then our food supply with JBS not too long ago. I know Ellen used some powerful cybersecurity stats in her talk. And from a threat vector standpoint, with the Russians attacking critical infrastructure, it is that cyber threat vector that is absolutely of predominant concern. One of the stats I like to point to, and this is from Cybersecurity Ventures, they predict that there will be a ransomware-aware attack on businesses every 11 seconds by the end of this year, which is up from every 40 seconds in 2016. And then they predict that it will be every 2 seconds by 2031. And so, maybe there's a silver lining there, because every cybersecurity professional out there listening in, you'd probably call that job security, right? So I don't know if that's a silver lining, but, there's that. And I think for companies that comprise the defense industrial base, or even part of one of these critical infrastructure, 16 critical infrastructure sectors, I think they're, at this point, pretty keenly aware of that cybersecurity threat. I think every CEO, in the DIB and in these other critical infrastructure sector companies has these types of very sophisticated state-sponsored cyber attacks very high on their worry list. And by the way, none of us, none of you, none of us stand a chance if it is truly a state-sponsored cyber attack. You don't stand a chance, right? So, I think the major defense and aerospace companies tend to move out, in my experience, the fastest on new programs and initiatives. I was a part in my past life of driving, actually led the government-wide review after the Navy Yard shooting, and led and post Snowden and post WikiLeaks. Really drove the mandate to stand up insider threat programs across our most trusted companies across the National Industrial Security Program. And I saw, I saw the big companies move out first, and then I saw them actually take on a mentorship role for a lot of the mid-size and the smaller companies. So I think that's an example of what we probably can expect to see. I think we've seen the same thing with cybersecurity. We've seen a lot of the major primes invest in sophisticated cyber sensors to monitor their networks and actually consent to working with us on the Intel side to deploy our sophisticated cyber sensors and orient those toward the government, so that we actually had a shared view into that, the threat landscape as it relates to attempted penetrations by our adversaries in terms of tactics and techniques that they were using. And I think that's an indicator, and really now. So I think with supply chain risk management, the cybersecurity trail that's been blazed, and how we've seen a lot of the momentum on cyber take off. The big six and really big 12, I think, are really embracing it, and they're going to be the ones to actually drive this next expansion into kind of widening that trail for broader supply chain risk management considerations. So, really recently, I'd say within the last 8 months, we've seen BAE, Boeing, GD, Lockheed, Northrop, Raytheon, all of them now, in my opinion, they've seen the signal break through the noise on supply chain risk management. They've stood up governance around supply chain risk management. They're actively soliciting for solutions and standing up programs at the corporate level. And frankly, I give a lot of credit to Ellen Lord and her team in all the work that they did during her tenure at the Pentagon with cybersecurity, really under the tremendous leadership of the former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Acquisition, Kevin Fahey, Katie Arrington, who I'm sure everybody on this call knows, and Stacy Bostjanik, and many other phenomenal leaders. And again, their work in cybersecurity, working with the defense industrial base, really blazed a trail for prioritizing cybersecurity across the DIB, one type, one threat vector, right? But a really important one. That we're now, again, working to just kind of follow behind and widen to be more comprehensive of other threat vectors with more broad, a broader view of supply chain risk management. And the goal, I think, really is to have, an investment, a voluntary investment, and a recognition across the DIB to that supply chain risk is not going away. They have got to know what's going on in their sub-tier supplier ecosystems and understand, those very dynamic and constantly changing sub-tier supplier ecosystems, that the risk that is organic and inherent, the vulnerability that those sub-tier suppliers that are relied on present are absolutely translate into program level risk and corporate level risk for the major primes and companies that work with them. That is much easier said than done, right? To actually illuminate that sub-tier supplier ecosystem. And that's something we focus very heavily on and have over the last couple of years in support of DoD and the defense industrial base. So, my hope is, we're really looking to align incentives. This is actually something we fleshed out as a concept in a report called Deliver Uncompromised. I was the executive sponsor for this report that I had MITRE put out. But it was really, the intent behind this, if you have any interest in reading it, if you haven't read it, it's called Deliver Uncompromised. MITRE put it out, but it was intended to serve as a call to action and a call to arms to really get everybody to understand the macro view on this problem set, and that we really had a ton of work to do to actually change the incentive structure so that our defense industrial based companies started to view this investment as a competitive advantage, and that we were realigning the entire acquisition apparatus in particular, to incentivize the right behavior, not just for cybersecurity, but for really supply chain risk management more broadly. Bob Metzger, who I don't know if he's still on, but he was on Ellen's session this morning. I saw a question he asked in the chat. He was one of the authors of that report, and he's one of my mentors. And he really, I thought, asked Ellen Lord a great and foundational question, which was, how do we think about cybersecurity in relation to broader supply chain risk management? So I'd like to spend just a minute on that, because I think it'll be interesting and relevant the way I think about it. So when we think of a comprehensive supply chain risk management program, and the way we've structured our supply chain risk management model, our risk model for the DoD enterprise, for the defense industrial base, corporate level clients, there's really way I think about it, there are two high level categories. The first is macro, or what I call imposed risk. You think of that as a bucket, right? That's things like climate events and environmental disruption, pandemics, geopolitical risk, things like territorial disputes on trade routes, forced labor issues, economic instability, trade restrictions, sanctions, trade wars, all those things that are sort of imposed. You can't control them. They're external macro level risks. The second big bucket is what I call inherent risk, and that we break that down into four primary categories. The first is operational risk. The second is financial health risk. The third is foreign ownership, control, and influence. And the fourth is what we call RCR, reputational, criminal, and regulatory risk. So to just put cybersecurity in that broader framework, just so you know how I think about it and where cyber fits, it's really just one type of operational risk that within that high level inherent risk category, along with things like M&A activity, labor issues, and things of that like. So while cybersecurity absolutely deserves, don't get me wrong, its own focus and prioritization, and there's so much ground that we have yet to cover, it's certainly, you know, the threat vector of choice for our most problematic adversaries, and they exploit it so effectively. And frankly, our defensive game, our defense game is horrible. Right? We all know that, right? Our defenses are porous. It's like Swiss cheese. You know, we've got a ton of work to do there. But I say that, I give you that broader framework just so you can keep in mind that cybersecurity, while critically important, is really just one of many other types of risks that need to be considered in any effective and holistic supply chain risk management program. With that, I forgot to set my own timer. I have no idea how I'm doing on time, but I'm thinking I must be getting close. So, okay, 5 minutes. Awesome. Perfect. So I don't actually know that I can see questions because I had to switch to my phone. So let me, maybe somebody could be kind enough to read the questions to me. No questions. Does anyone have any questions at all? Or is everybody ready just to wrap up the day? I totally get it if that's the case. I see a little button. Okay, I think I can see. All right, I can't really read the chat. So I assume there aren't any questions. So again, I could talk for days on this topic, but I guess
Right. I want for you to talk for days. I want for you to talk for days because I have so many questions. The little, like, you know, bullets moving at the bottom were my questions. So I mean, I absolutely love that. And if I could ask you, my first question would be, you know, tell us more about the why behind Deliver Uncompromised. I'm personal friends with Chris Nissen, so I'm a huge fan. And Bob Metzger does an incredible job. So I'm, a big fan of that report. And I'm so glad you cited it. Could you just mention a couple additional points for this audience to consider about that report?
Yeah, so I mean, I just say go read the report, right? I won't try to summarize it in a minute, but a little bit of what you won't get in the report, I guess, in terms of the genesis of that concept. So we started working, I won't even try to remember what year it was. I'm going to try. I want to say it was 2015. I think that's when I got to the Pentagon, 2016, right? So if you think about where we were with the administration and the fact that, frankly, at that time, you could barely say that China wasn't our friend, right? So think about how much has changed since 2015, 2016, right? So we were really kind of at this point where, and I know the department and how it works, and anybody who's worked in the Pentagon knows that good luck getting something controversial through the staffing process to actually have it ever see the light of day. So the backstory is, and I can say this now because I'm not in the government, we actually wrote created the skeleton for that report. Actually under a contract that was an Intel community contract. We couldn't really do anything publicly with it, but that's where we fleshed it out and kind of came up with the core skeleton, the concepts that ended up being what we now know as Deliver Uncompromised. And then we really realized, I knew, like, there was some controversial stuff in there, especially at that time, right? And I knew we were never going to ever get it through the staffing process in OSD, and it would probably die through, you know, death by 1,000 bureaucratic paper cuts, right? So we decided to bring in MITRE and the amazing folks you just mentioned, this incredible team of thought leaders who took it and took the bones and just added all the meat and the muscle and everything else around it, and really just so thoughtfully brought together different working groups of experts to inform the concepts. And it was just such an amazing thing to be part of. And then, you know, and then we were like, okay, we got it to a point where it was generally, you know, I think we'd fleshed out a lot of the key concepts and we knew it would make a splash. And we said, okay, MITRE, it's yours, go ahead and launch, right? And they did. and it was beautiful, and it wasn't attributed to me until just now, probably. So so it was just a little trick. Anybody in government, if you need to get stuff done, I've learned a lot of ways to get stuff done despite the whole system being rigged to not let you get anything done, frankly. So so that's
things were done. I mean, this report came out and it's super important, and I can't tell you how many times it's been referenced in conversations I've had around supply chain security. So you all, hit the mark. Thank you so much for being a part of that. And, we're really grateful for you keynoting today. This has been an incredible conversation. And, my thanks also to Ellen Lord. When I was talking to Ellen, I'm like, oh, I can't believe Carrie Wibben may do a keynote with us. And she said, yes, she will. So
Ellen's amazing. I'm totally in her fan club. I'd like to say I'm the president, and she's the chairman of my board. So full disclosure, I have a very close relationship with Ellen. She's fantastic. So no, this was an honor. Thank you so much for having me. And I hope we're all together doing this in a room, face to face next year.
That would be great.
Thumbs up emoji. I just don't have it on the screen.
So thank you for that, Carrie. We totally enjoyed your talk. We could have had you talk for even longer. So next time we'll have you back.
I look forward to it. Thanks.